Welcome to the Asylum. And now, your hosts, Rick Fleeger and Rick Briggs.
That's right. Welcome back to the Asylum Fantasy Sports Show, now a proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. Check out this and countless other great fantasy sports podcasts at fulltimefantasy.com, on the tweeters at Fulltime Fantasy, and of course you can follow your boys at asylumfantasysports.com, at Asylum Football on Twitter, and of course you can be part of the mailbag on Friday, asylumfootball@gmail.com. Rick, week 2 is in the books, and I feel like I know less now than I did going into week 1 and back out of week 1. What a mess week 2 was.
It really was. We are Fleeger and Briggs. Welcome to the Asylum Sports Show on the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. And you're absolutely right, Rick. I mean, quarterbacks are dropping like flies. There's only one sure thing that I know of right now is the Miami Dolphins stink.
Yeah, they ought to be relegated if we could do that.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But I tell you what, it is a mess in the quarterback world, especially playing fantasy football.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd have told me 3 weeks ago that at this point there would be no Ben Roethlisbrger, no Drew Brees, no Eli Manning, you could still throw him in there. No Nick Foles. Who am I missing? It feels like there's 8 other ones. I think that's everybody. Cam Newton in this probably
in a walking boot.
This is awful for the league. It really is. It's terrible for fantasy football, and I think that's probably where most of our focus is going to be the next couple of days.
And one of the leagues that I'm in is a 2-quarterback league, and I walked out of the draft thinking, okay, I'm set. I have Drew Brees and Ben Roethlisberger.
Oh no, are you one of the unfortunate ones
yes,
who have
I
both?
Am. I had both of them in my, pardon me. I figured, well, Kirk Cousins can fill in on a bye week. He is now my primary starter, believe it or not. And I actually
that's not good.
No, it's not. And I actually did pick up, I think, Case Keenum off of waivers.
Is that the one I'm in with you?
Yeah.
I might be able to help you out with that. We'll meet up after the show. I mean, we might be able to work something out. So, let's get into it, Rick. Obviously, Ben Roethlisberger gone for the season, elbow surgery. Where are the Steelers at? Where is that Steelers offense at with Mason Rudolph?
I'm not sure. I really don't.
I'm actually kind of excited.
I'm excited, too. I was just going to say, where were they with Ben Roethlisberger the first 2 weeks? And Mason Rudolph acquitted himself quite well against Seattle. The defense blew that football game.
Right.
And the interception that he did throw certainly wasn't Mason Rudolph's fault. It
Donte
was Dante Stonehands.
He ought to be arrested at this point, I would think. Just jail him.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't even make the start sits. He is a drop.
Yeah, he's in prison. That's a 4th category we didn't know about. Start, sit, drop, and in prison, and that's where he falls. Good Lord.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited as well. I don't really know what else to say about this. Everything that I've seen in Mason Rudolph in the preseason and in that game against Seattle, he looked like he has command of the offense. He looks like he has confidence. He has a good arm. He has good pocket presence. I don't know what's going to happen with this offense, but I'm hoping that the Fitzpatrick pickup on defense is going to solidify that defense so they're not blowing away football games.
Yeah, so I think that's the biggest point. Through 6 quarters, even before Roethlisberger was grabbing at his elbow late in the second quarter of that game, I found myself sitting there wondering, most guys not named Tom Brady and Drew Brees to a degree, and we'll get to him soon enough, when they hit that wall, even when Peyton Manning hit the wall, it was just sort of all of a sudden he wasn't that guy anymore. Now, Manning's a bad example because he still managed to win a Super Bowl with that, but it wasn't because of Peyton Manning.
No, I mean, he was throwing lame ducks out there that they just happened to catch.
I found myself sitting there wondering, has Ben Roethlisberger hit it, or was it just the lack of practice and lack of preseason, and was he going to find it in a couple of weeks? I had a legitimate concern there already. Maybe he wasn't healthy. Maybe there was elbow issues we didn't know about. I don't know. But I think when you look at it, I don't think this changes much for the running game. It hasn't been good. It's got to get better. I think you're going to see, James Conner dealing with a knee issue at this point in the week. He says he's going to be fine. We haven't really heard anything from the Steelers at this point. Vance McDonald, it's great for, at least, coming out of what we saw in the second half. I think it has to be good for James Washington, right? What they did together in college, what they did together in this preseason, where kind of all the James Washington hype that came up was when Mason Rudolph was in the game, and it seemed for whatever reason, Ben Roethlisberger, if it was Juju double covered, Ryan Switzer double covered, and Eli Rogers double covered. I don't think he's on the roster right now.
No.
And Washington running 45 yards downfield all alone, Roethlisberger would look him off. He had no trust with him. There was something there. So I think maybe all those guys, you being one of them, who predicted a big year or a big leap for James Washington this year, I mean, if he wasn't already rostered, I think he was in most places, this is your top waiver wire pickup coming out of this
Pittsburgh
scenario.
Moncrief would be off the team, and I'd bring Eli Rogers back in. He can catch the football at least.
Get rid of Switzer, too.
And get rid of Switzer.
If he's not going to be returning punts, he's got no business on this team. 14
catches for 3 yards. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, catch by Switzer. Whoop, he fell over. I mean, it's terrible. And
there was an unhealthy obsession of him by Ben Roethlisberger.
Yes.
So this is real bad news, and it's not affecting anybody's fantasy team, but really bad news for Ryan Switzer.
I agree. And
you bring up Minkah Fitzpatrick. Are you surprised at all, and then we'll get outside of fantasy here a little bit, are you surprised at all the narrative, both nationally but specifically here in Western Pennsylvania, of how ridiculous of a trade this is, giving up that first-round pick right after Roethlisberger goes out and looking for his replacement and giving up what could be a top 10 pick? I've been stunned by this.
I'm not, because it doesn't really much matter. They never they never trade up to get anybody.
Right.
They never trade, and they never make deals in free agency. Blah, 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 blah. And then they make a deal to get Devin Bush. Now they've made a deal and brought in Fitzpatrick, tried to solidify that defense. They brought in Steven Nelson off of free agency in the offseason. Well, what do they do? Steven Nelson, he's not that good. Well, he's in top 20 in coverage, okay? Then they got Devin Bush in. And like you say, now all of a sudden this is terrible deal, Fitzpatrick. What if Mason Rudolph stinks? Well, what if your first-round draft choice stinks next year? We got a number one pick that Miami's picking up the bonus for, and we can play right now.
Yeah.
I mean, how bad can that be?
I mean, yeah, exactly. Rewind yourself to last year and say the Pittsburgh Steelers with the 10th pick in the draft, or do it in 2020 with the 10th pick in the draft. The pitch is essentially what happens. The Pittsburgh Steelers select Minkah Fitzpatrick. Minkah Fitzpatrick is already signed, has a $5 million cap hit over the 4 or 5 years of his deal. And, we didn't mention he's the one guy in this draft with a year of NFL experience, and he's been really, really good, so we know he's not a bust.
Hell yeah.
It's absurd, this notion that, first of all, I don't think they go 4-12. I think this is a 7-9, 8-8. Maybe if Rudolph hits, it's a 9-7 type of team. So you're still going to be picking, 16 to 22 anyhow. Secondly, how often do these top 10 quarterbacks hit and be ready to step in? Plus, and I don't know why, but I believe him, Ben Roethlisberger's saying, I'm going to be back. I signed a 3-year deal. I'm going to play him out. So if Mason Rudolph doesn't work out, you get a presumably healthy Ben Roethlisberger back, coming off a year of rest on his body, and you got Minkah Fitzpatrick in that secondary. It's already the best first-round pick of the 2020 draft, and it's going to be hard for anybody to supplant that.
And Mason Rudolph is not going to stink.
No,
I'm not saying he's going to. I mean, he's easily Jacoby Brissett numbers.
I think that's his floor, Jacoby Brissett, and you don't know what his ceiling is.
You have no idea what the ceiling is. I agree. I'm kind of excited about it.
But it's just these draft nicks. Everybody shut up where your fourth round, the 18th pick in the fourth round is more valuable than Joe Namath in his prime. That's all this is, right? And Brian Clark, he can shut up too. He's just out there yapping all the time.
And we'll get into one of my rants later. But
did I scoop a little bit?
No, you didn't. But you just brought up somebody that reminded me of it. So.
All right. So moving on, Drew Brees out 6 to 8 weeks at least. We don't really have a firm timeline, but that's what they're guessing. Ligament damage in his thumb, had surgery today. This is a bigger deal than Ben Roethlisberger.
Oh, that's a huge deal. I mean, New Orleans has gone from a division favorite, a Super Bowl contender, to we don't have any idea.
Teddy Bridgewater's no good.
They're not even naming him the starter.
That's just game playing. We're really going to hand the keys to Taysom Hill?
I can't imagine
Seriously?
they would.
They'll keep running absurd packages for him. And actually, it helps in this scenario when you don't have Drew Brees. It's absurd when Drew Brees is there.
Right.
You got first and goal at the 5. You got Drew Brees with Alvin Kamara standing beside him, and Taysom Hill's flopping around in the backfield. I don't understand any of that nonsense. But Teddy Bridgewater, God bless him, great comeback story, all of this stuff, but he stinks. He's not that good.
No, I agree with you. Don't know how it's going to progress. If he'll maybe get better, get a little more comfortable, get a little more sure of himself. It's been a while. I understand that, but I tend to agree. I think the Saints are plummeting.
You know who I think's the biggest loser in this, Rick, is Alvin Kamara. I think Michael Thomas. Look, it's going to be a temper your expectations, but a guy with that catch radius, that good of a receiver, he'll be fine. He's going to be worth what you paid for him. But Alvin Kamara, you take away the specter of any type of passing game, plus all this nonsense they're going to do with Taysom Hill.
Sure.
It's going to be tough sledding running the ball for him.
Well, you have a 1-1 to 1-4 draft pick in Kamara.
Right.
And you have probably 1-10 to 2-1
right, in the turn there.
Thomas, excuse me. Yeah, Thomas is going to be, at least on the surface, I think is going to be well worth that, much more than Kamara will be for what you paid for him.
Yeah, I just think you take away kind of the exotic things you can do to get the ball with Kamara in space, no fear of Teddy Bridgewater from defenses. I think that's where it's really, really good. Unless they've got some magical thing with Taysom Hill and Kamara. I don't know. I hate this Taysom Hill thing. Daniel Jones getting his first start for the Giants, Rick. Eli done apparently for the year. Not much to talk about from a fantasy standpoint there. It's going to be a wait and see. You know, we've talked all offseason how hard I'm rooting for Daniel Jones, just the way those troglodytes in New York and the draftniks treated him. So I'm rooting for him big. It's going to be a struggle. I think he's going to be fine. Who's Eli Manning to you?
That's what one of my things that bothered me today was
one of your many.
Was Eli Manning. Of course, on Twitter, it comes up, is Eli Manning, assuming Eli Manning is just totally done, where he came out with a perfect quote today, I'm not dying and the season isn't over yet. But is Eli Manning Hall of Fame worthy? And, of course, they come out, damn the 2 Super Bowl wins. He's terrible. He's played horrible the last 5 or 6 years. He's miserable. He's this, he's that, he's nothing, blah, blah, blah. And it kept coming and coming, He's been horrible and just ridiculous the last few years and this, that, and the other. And I got to thinking, okay, we've been on doing this show for, 10 years? And
feels
of course,
like 40.
Eli's been part of it the entire time. And we've always had basically the same thing for Eli. You got good Eli, you have bad Eli,
right.
But you know about what you're going to get. He's a veteran quarterback. Well, anyway, they kind of stuck to me. This he's just been miserable the last 5 or 6 years. He doesn't deserve it, and this, that, and the other. So I did a little research. And in 2005 to 2009, which is a 5-year stint, I did 5-4 in the last 5. So that's how many years we have. It doesn't include 2019. He was, I won't give you the total yards or whatever, but he had 58% completion rate, 119 touchdowns, 79 picks. His record was 49-31. He had an 81.3 QBR in 05 to 09. In 10 to 13, he had a 60% completion rate, 104 touchdowns, 83 picks. His record was 35-29. His QBR was 83.7. Now, in the last 5 years, not including 2019, these 2 games, he has a 63% completion rate. He has 131 touchdowns and only 68 picks. He has an 88.9 completion rating. Quarterback rating, and his record is 31-48. All his stats are better. His record has tanked. Now you go back to 2005 and 6. They had Tiki Barber. 2006 to 2011, they had Brandon Jacobs. 2007 to 12, they added Ahmad Bradshaw. You remember those years. Yeah. From 2011 to 13, they had Andre Brown. And from 2014 to 2016, they had Rashad Jennings. The defense sucked.
Right.
In 2005 to 2011, the Giants' defense were no worse than 19th. 19th was the worst in all those years. 12th was the next, and then they were above that all those other years. Since then, they have never been better than 22nd.
But it's all
Eli's fault. His stats are better. He's got, until Barkley, he's had no run game for virtually, 7 years.
Right.
The record's 31-48, which put him to an even 500 record over the last 15 years, whatever it is, and it's all his fault. Shut up.
Yeah,
this isn't some propaganda to get him to the hall like I'm an Eli lover, but this is ridiculous. The vitriol they come out with Daniel Jones, Eli's our man, Eli, and now he's so horrible.
Right.
They don't even want to see him go to the hall because he's miserable.
Yeah, here's what I don't get with this, and it's actually infuriating. Does he have Hall of Fame credentials? You know what? I don't know, because quarterback numbers and offensive numbers, starting in this era in the 2000s are so inflated. I don't know what the criteria is going to be. But if you're a New York Giants fan, if you're an NFL fan, here is a man with the last name of Manning. So you have that legacy.
Okay.
Won 2 Super Bowls, one of them against an undefeated New England, both of them against New England Patriots teams, but one of them against an undefeated Patriots team. Kept them in contention. To your point, for the last 7 or 8 years, have put absolutely nothing around him. And the dismissive, look, I get it.
Oh.
We said at the top of this, with Ben Roethlisbrger, I'm kind of excited to see what happens with Mason Rudolph. And this scenario could play out in Pittsburgh. It's already playing out a little bit just on the Twitter monsters, but that Mason Rudolph comes out and does what Ben Roethlisberger did his rookie year when Tommy Maddox went down, and we're having that debate. And there is going to be a segment they're saying, yeah, Ben Roethlisberger stinks. He's been getting worse. He's always kind of stunk, and he got lucky, and the defense was – no. He won 2 Super Bowls. Guess what? Eli won 2 Super Bowls. Eli was a great quarterback. Yes, his career is done. Yes, I think Daniel Jones is the best option for this team. This team isn't going to win 5 games, so it makes sense to make the move now. But how about this? Say, thank you, Eli.
Yeah.
Thank you for these 2 Lombardi trophies that we have pissed all over ever since by putting nothing else around you and taking it for granted, rather than putting it back on him, mocking his career, minimizing all his accomplishments. You New York Giants fans, I hope you go 2-12 or 2-14 for the rest of infinity. And I hope that stupid stadium, because the Jets suck too, falls into that Hudson River or whatever. Just shut up. This is unbelievable.
And that was more that came out. Then somebody will come up, well, he does have 2 Super Bowl titles. That doesn't matter. These asshats put Joe Namath in, blah, blah. You know what? It's the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Joe frickin' Namath was the Arnold Palmer of the NFL in the late 60s. If it wasn't for Joe Namath and some of these other guys...
none of this would be here.
Exactly. And you can't compare stats. And that'll lead to another rant that I have later on, too, because I am sick of these petulant children. If they don't remember something, it's terrible. And I can't stand it.
And it's just, why can't we? I don't know why it has to be. It's typical of our political culture now. It's social media culture is what it is. Everything has to be in absolutes. Well, yeah, so he did all that, but it was 8-10 years ago, and what these sucked these last 5 years, which I think you've proven he hasn't. But let's even accept that. He hasn't been as good these last
The
five.
teams haven't.
Well,
absolutely.
Well, that's it. But all right.
And you're throwing to frickin' Sterling Shepard and some other bums instead of Amani Toomer and Ike Hilliard or whoever they are. But I don't know. I don't get it.
But let's go ahead and pin these last 5 years on Eli Manning. Fine, if you want to do that. You can't just discount what he had accomplished to that point, what he meant to that franchise, winning those Super Bowls. I flat don't. And look, and of course in the last 5 years his skills have declined. Maybe his numbers haven't, but I think reasonable people can agree his skills have declined. I can name you two people, Barry Sanders and Jim Brown are the only people I can remember that retired at the peak of their powers. Otherwise, everybody else had to start sucking or be so injured that they walked away. Those are the only two scenarios other than those two guys that an NFL player. So you can't take every guy who has to retire because his skills diminish when he's pressing 40 and throw out every accomplishment he had up until that point. That is absurd. That's social media millennial horse crap that continues to go on. Whether the Hall of Fame, I think that's a good debate. And maybe in the offseason we can have that debate. But to say what's being said about this
what
man.
would have happened? What would have happened, say, I don't know, I don't even know when the last Super Bowl the Giants had. What was that? 15, 13? I don't even remember now.
It's been a long time.
But what if Eli says, man, that's 2 Super Bowls. Thanks, everybody. I'm out of here.
He quit on his team.
What are you
He's
doing?
a
What are you
loser.
doing?
We
already heard it with Andrew Luck, didn't we?
Exactly. So it's these animals on social media. They ought to ban Twitter. I've had it. So let's go through these rapid fire, Rick. We got to get through these tonight here quick. Deshaun Jackson expected to miss 2 games with a groin. Alshon Jeffrey questionable with a calf strain. Big questions in Philadelphia right now at the wide receiver position.
Oh, there's no doubt about that, but none more than there is in New York.
Right.
And Brian Baldinger, I'm still on this thing. Brian Baldinger put a thing out here. He goes, quit harping on Eli. 0-2 isn't his fault. And he had this montage of like 8 passes dead on the frickin' money, bouncing off these clowns like they were all Donte Moncrief.
It all comes back to Moncrief. Michael Gallup out 2 to 4 weeks, had his meniscus trimmed up, and Damian Williams and LaShawn McCoy. Williams with a knee, McCoy with ankle question marks for week 3. So maybe after that terrible LaShawn McCoy signing for fantasy owners, Darwin Thompson gives everybody 1 week of what they were hoping for.
Yeah.
So more to come on that. All right, let's get into it, Rick. Week 2 takeaways. What did Rick Briggs walk out of week 2?
Okay, the first thing I walked out of was a mystery. When does getting your run game on track throw off the passing game? I don't know, unless you're the Minnesota Vikings, I don't know. because I mean that's I just can't. Everything Delvin Cook has done through 2 weeks has lived up to and exceeded what you expected from him.
Far
right?
exceeded.
Cousins, even though he's been known to come up pretty small in big games, he's always been able to throw up numbers.
Right.
And he still has Thielen. He still has Diggs, Rudolph, all the tools that are there. And he's 22 of 42, 328 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. He's got to get on track if he's capable of doing so, or this season's going to get out of control quick, I think.
That's what I can't figure with him. He was always a Tony Romo-like figure to me.
Right.
In that, he's putting up big numbers. He's going to gag it away or do something stupid in the fourth quarter when it really matters or in a big game. I still think of that game where the Redskins went up to New York in Week 17. Was it 3 years ago, maybe more now?
Something like that, yeah.
Where all they had to do was win. The Giants were already in, benched all their starters, and Kirk Cousins managed to throw 17 interceptions, and they still lost. So he's a loser, and why they gave him that much money. But usually statistically, and then you give him Thielen and everything Thielen did last season, and Diggs, he looked healthy in Week 2. And now you get the running game going, and he's worse. The numbers are terrible. And the interception he threw in the fourth quarter was probably the most ridiculous interception of his career, and that's saying something.
That was as bad as Brett Favre's across the field in the playoffs. Yeah. What was it, against the Saints, I believe it was. It just totally uncalled for and ridiculous.
Yeah, Minnesota's going to regret that deal. I think that's going to set them back. He's just not that dude. All right, my first one, Rick, I feel like we can do this every week, but boy, it really has shown through 2 weeks of this year. The officiating in the National Football League has just reached absurd, ridiculous, stinking levels. I don't even care about the Saints getting jobbed again. You know what, the Saints fans, this is your fault. All your whining and crying and picketing and suing and nonsense, you can all shut up. And you brought this ridiculous PI review into the purview of the National Football League. And Al Riveron and all his lackeys and these idiots on the field have no idea how to apply this, no idea what to do with it. Let's even take that out. Let's take that out as a one-year anomaly where I hope they realize what a failed experiment this is, and it goes away trying to objectively look at a completely subjective call. Holding penalties are up 66%, Rick. I'll say that number again, 66% per game over 2 games.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, Rick, because I did some research on that.
Have I taken both of your rants in the first 15 minutes of the show?
This isn't a rant, and I was just trying to add on to you, and I will let you go back to it, but compare 4 years ago, just 4 measly years ago, 2015,
years ago,
there were a total of 4,327 flags thrown in the football season for a total of 31,275 yards.
Okay.
Write that down. 31,275.
Okay.
In the first 2 weeks, there have been 622 flags thrown for a total of 4,182 yards. Bear in mind, some of these flags were declined. But it's 9.72 penalties per team per game. And for a 16-game season, that would equate to 9,952 flags. Forget this, 66,912 yards.
It's ridiculous. It's completely unwatchable. There is no big play unless Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes make it that's not coming back. Again, I've said this on the show before. Kick returns, just take kickoffs out. Punt returns, here's what you do. You put a rush in. You don't have anybody back. They kick. Wherever the ball lands, you take it half the distance to the goal from there because there will be a hole or a block in the back, and that's where you start. Yeah. You want player safety.
Unless it goes out of bounds. Yeah, right. Then we'll give it there.
Yeah, if you want player safety, that's what you do. You let them try to block it, kick it wherever it stops moving, half the distance to the goal from there, and off we go. It's gotten so, and there's no rhyme or reason to. That Bradley Chubb call on that roughing the passer. Are you freaking so many calls that impact the end of the game? Just awful. Chicago had no business winning that football game.
No.
The ball was still in Trubisky's hand. It's so frustrating. I think I honestly am starting to believe. I'm worked up. I'm honestly starting to believe this is like, Rome fell eventually, right? Nobody thought it would fall until it fell. I'm sitting there last week, and I'm watching this flag fest, and I'm watching all this nonsense going on. I'm watching all the top quarterbacks go down. That's not necessarily the league's fault. I'm watching Antonio Brown with everything I know going on, catching touchdowns and dancing down in Miami. And, boy, you see this, and you just think, how much longer can this really be sustainable? This area, it's eating itself from the inside where it's almost becoming a prisoner of your own fame. This has become such a big deal. Everything's so highly scrutinized, and then you kowtow to the social media mob about the officiating, and you officiate it tighter, and you add more in these games.
Now it's already getting to the point, I don't want to play here anymore, trade me.
Well,
and they do. Instead of saying, buck up there, bucko, or you're sitting on the pine, or you won't get paid, or whatever,
that was my second one, so we'll jump right
in. Yours.
Well, we'll jump right into that. I don't ever remember this, or you'd hear it.
It's crazy.
This trade deadline is going to look like the freaking NHL trade deadline.
We call ourselves the asylum, but that NFL asylum is starting to be run by the inmates as well as social media.
Well, and that's what kind of the takeaway is long term. this new CBA they're supposedly working on, I don't know what we better start paying attention to tennis or the WNBA or something, because we're going to be doing a podcast on something else. That's going to be a long one. Maybe the players do need to take some power back.
Are they negotiating that now?
That's what they claim.
Are agents involved in this at all, or what?
I don't
know.
Probably not in official capacity, probably for the player reps they're getting. Yeah, I don't know how. But this is going to be a long one, because you see, maybe rightly so, maybe wrong, I don't know. But the players have finally stood up and said, enough. We're going to start controlling our own destiny right now. And the owners are circling the wagons even more with it. I steal this from Michael Wilbon on PTI, the plantation mentality of the NFL. You got a war brewing, and it's not just about money and retirement benefits and kind of the traditional things of the past. If you're free agency, this is an entire culture shift going on. And I don't know how you resolve that between, a bunch of 24-year-old millennial millionaires and a bunch of 85-year-old billionaires. I don't know how this ever gets resolved.
I don't either, quite frankly. I tell you what, another takeaway that I have more, I guess on a more positive note, is I'm starting to believe in Jimmy Garoppolo again.
Yeah, look
good. This 49er offense turned it on against Cincinnati, albeit that's not a huge deal in the fact it was the Bengals. But, they put up around 250 yards rushing in a really nice balanced attack. Garoppolo went, 17-25 for 297, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. He got some of his swag back, I think, and I think the concern for that knee isn't there anymore. I think the confidence is back to the old Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm really starting to believe that this team could be dangerous.
Yeah, sitting at 2-0. I mean, it's not like they beat the 85 Bears and the 2000 Rams, but you went on the road. You start out 2-0 on the road. And I honestly thought, I believed I picked Cincinnati outright. I didn't like that, San Francisco staying in Youngstown for a week. Apparently that was the right decision. Although I don't think it's ever a good decision to stay in Youngstown for any period of time. If you're not from the area, you don't understand that. But trust us on this one. But yeah, you get 2 wins on the road. I don't care who you played. You see a nice progression week 1 to week 2. You go back home against the Steelers team who hates to tackle people, and with a new quarterback, good chance to go 3-0. Yeah, they're looking good. Kind of the last one for me. Is it time to be concerned after 2 weeks about the usage of some player? We talk about the numbers, and we're about to do that with game balls and stinky socks. But when I see how little Kerryon Johnson, David Johnson, even Todd Gurley to a degree, Duke Johnson, all the Johnsons specifically, how little they're being used. Somebody struggles at the beginning and say it's 2 weeks, the team's feeling it out, new offensive lineman, new scheme, this, that. I'll always explain that away. When I see David Johnson barely touching the ball, when I see Kerryon Johnson off the field half the time, every time he touches the ball, you can almost understand where all that hype came from in the offseason. I've really paid attention to him through these 2 games. Kid's electric when he gets the ball in his hands, but he's on the sideline with his hat in his hand 60% of the game.
And it's nothing that should surprise us. I mean, we caught it. It's Detroit. That's, for some reason, since Barry Sanders, they do not dedicate.
No, they don't want to.
They apparently not. And I really don't know where this mentality comes from some teams. Now, I can understand, you go back to the Ingram Kamara. I mean, two fine backs, and they ran, and they both had, plenty of reps, plenty of carries, and so forth. But I don't understand the, like you said, with the knee with Gurley maybe, but Johnson really makes no sense on
David
on the Cardinals.
Johnson's
That's
the
what
one.
I mean. Yeah.
You bring in Kingsbury, big offensive mind. You got a toy, the likes of David Johnson. You get him the ball in space and everything he can do. And all he is an extra tight end. He's just another blocker. I mean, that's the one I really don't understand. And, boy, as good as Kyler Murray's been starting out, and he has more than surpassed my expectations through 2 games. And you're not even using the best weapon on that team outside of Kyler Murray. That one scares the hell out of me.
And you think you go through preseason, training camp, and then the preseason games. Tampa Bay comes to mind. Why in the hell was Ronald Jones in the games as much as he was to start with?
Right.
I mean, he's far and away inferior to Peyton Barber as an all-round player. And I don't think he's as good a ball handler, runner as, Oogly
Boogly. Back to that for old Asylumite.
yeah, the old Oogly Boogly. But I just don't have any idea why this kind of committee stuff seems to come through all the time.
Yeah,
it makes no sense to me.
It seems to be on struggling offenses, is really where I see it. So,
it is Ogunbowale.
Like I said.
Dare Ogunbowale.
Like I said,
yeah.
Oogly Boogly. Yeah. All right, you got any more records?
Nope,
time
that's
for balls
it, man.
and song. All right, well, it's time.
Game ball goes to.
Does that seem a little quiet to you?
A little bit.
Game balls and stinky socks, Rick. I'll let you start this show.
All right.
Game ball goes to.
Pat Mahomes. I'm sorry.
Do we take him for granted almost?
What can you do? 30 of 44, 443 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks.
Most of it in one quarter.
Yeah.
That's a ho-hum day.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I mean, this guy, you talk about regression. He has regressed from super-duper elite status to super elite status. I don't know. I mean, that's about all there is.
No regret. I mean, that was one other takeaway I had jotted down in the margins here if we had more time to kill. I mean, the AFC's over, right? It's the patch or the Chiefs. There's nobody else can sneak up into that thing.
I can't. A lot of hype on Baltimore. I'm not buying that. The Chargers,
they're just too banged up every
week.
Another guy on defense is out.
Oh, they had that game
in
hand last week. Had 2 touchdowns called back. They had missed field goals. They missed the penalties. If they stop self-imploding, they still have a shot. But as an outside shot, yeah. I mean, other than that, it's New England and freaking Kansas City.
Yeah, it's pretty much over. I'll stay at the quarterback position, Rick. And I think we got to tip the hat. I wanted to see the follow-up Lamar Jackson. It wasn't 9,000 yards and 18 touchdowns like he did against Miami, and I tended to discount it. 270 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, another 120 yards rushing. That's kind of what you expected for Lamar Jackson. Again, not the 85 Bears. He keeps stepping up. What a game this is going to be this week for Baltimore and Kansas City. That's what I'm really looking forward to. I think short-term Lamar Jackson is the real deal. And I say short-term. I just feel like we've seen this before, right? And the league's going to catch up to this. It feels very much like Colin Kaepernick is what it feels like. Kind of came in with that RPO. It was kind of a new deal and throwing the ball and could run the ball. And the league eventually figured him out. And I think Robert Griffin, same thing. I think the same thing could happen. You're starting to see this ascension of Josh Allen. He's a very similar type of player. Right. Going back to Michael Vick, you've seen guys like this have meteoric rises, and then the league tends to figure them out a little bit. But it lasts a year or two, so this might be the year of Lamar Jackson.
Exactly. Okay, I'm going... Obviously.
You stink.
My favorite category, the stinky sock. And I'm going right now. So far this year, Adam Vinatieri is 2 for 5 on point after touchdowns, and he's 1 for 3 on field goals. He's a big, stinky, wet, fly-infested, dirty sweat sock buried in an old trunk with rotten onions and dog feces.
Oh, wow. That's rather
Adam
specific.
Vinatieri, retire or either get your act together. Oh.
Yeah, we got that.
When, boy? When? Are you going to get your act together?
I think he needs to retire, right? Before this becomes an Eli Manning situation, right? You look back, was there 2 kickers in the hall now, I believe?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, he's the 3rd when he becomes eligible. Get out now. Greatest kicker career in my lifetime. These other guys, I was kind of the end of Morton Anderson. Greatest of my lifetime. It's over, dude. What is he, 47 or something?
46 years old.
Yeah, it's a shame you hate giving the stinky song, but he's cost them games. He's cost them 2 games.
Yeah.
Or 1 game.
Well, one game.
He could have cost them a
exactly.
second with his inability to kick. So, yeah, that's a shame. So I'm going to give one of these out myself. It's got to go your boy Mitch Trubisky again. This is 2 weeks in a row. 120 pass yards. Wouldn't know the end zone if it jumped up and bit him. Boy, I thought this cat was going to take a step forward. and all the kind of excitement you had around the Bears and the big things you were going to get out of the running game.
The Nagy offense.
Yeah, exactly. The Nagy offense and what we expected for at the wide receiver positions, all the sleepers you had coming out of that. Nobody can succeed because this clown can't find anybody down the field. The offensive line hasn't been good, but more so Mitch Trubisky's been terrible. So put him in that trunk with Adam Vinatieri with the onions and all the nonsense.
Okay, you got it.
Game ball goes to
Cooper Kupp. 5 catches, 120 yards. The stats aren't so much that are really the game ball worthy, but his running and yards after the carry, he looked phenomenal. Coming off that knee injury from last year, that
healthy.
cat looks good. And I'll tell you what, I'm really starting to go with you as far as the Rams in the NFC again, because even though it wasn't that convincing of a win, because the Saints were kind of depleted with Brees out, tell you what, man, Cooper Kupp looked very good.
Well, and that's what you look at this team compared to the team that went to the Super Bowl last year. They're sitting at 2-0. They're winning football games, managing Todd Gurley.
Right.
You think with the thought of having him, he basically disappeared in December and obviously in January and in early February. And then you took Cooper Kupp off. I don't know why I just said it that way. You took Cooper Kupp off the field at the end of that game. So now you got all these guys healthy. You're managing Todd Gurley.
I think last time we talked about him, he was Cupper
Coop. I kept saying, something. He's a blind spot for me. But that team's scary. You figure that's a team that got to the Super Bowl last year, mainly without the services of Cupper Coop, as I like to say, and with a way diminished Todd Gurley. If this management of his workload continues to work and Kupp keeps on this ascension, look the hell out.
Only gave up 9 points in the Super Bowl.
Right. Well, exactly.
So, yeah, I agree. All right, where are we at? Positive or negative here?
I'm going
that's
positive,
right. Yes, there we go.
I got a game ball. Chris Godwin, Rick. You're talking about one of those, preseason, early summer darlings who has worked out 8 for 121 and a touchdown. Has at this point completely supplanted Mike Evans as that team's top target. I bring him up more. Look, his numbers are great. We all kind of expected his numbers to be great. What I didn't expect was it to be at the expense of Mike Evans. So we could maybe throw to Mike Evans. I kind of threw week 1 out. He was sick. There was that whole deal going into it. There's no indication of that. Last week, do they become a duo, a dynamic duo, or is Evans and Evans owners, present company included, in trouble as Chris Godwin takes this next step?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't see someone like a Mike Evans disappearing for the year, but if he regresses down, into top 20 status instead of top 5 or whatever.
Spend a mid-second round pick on him, it stings a little bit.
You better believe it does. Okay, let's see. We are back to negative, which is what I like.
You stink.
Donte Moncrief.
Shock! You had to get
this
it in there.
This is 2 socks in a row. I will not give him another one because they should be used. Both these socks should be used to tie him to a bench somewhere, and he should never see the field ever again. This guy is horrifying.
So you're advocating using stinky socks to tie Donte Moncrief to a bench.
Exactly.
That's brilliant coaching. You should be a GM, Rick Briggs GM. So what am I at? I'm at a stinky sock.
You bet.
I got to give it to Josh Gordon. Boy, you wondered what the Antonio Brown impact would be on I almost said Jeff Gordon. Why do I do it?
I don't know. Why do you even try, right?
2 catches, 19 yards while Antonio Brown's running wild. Look, I don't think Antonio Brown's going to be on the field much longer. This might be good easing Josh Gordon back in, but they're just doing whatever they want on offense, and it isn't going downfield all that often. I think too many people were too excited about Josh Gordon. Look, he's going to have games where he catches 6 for 140 and 2 touches. He's going to have just as many of these. This is a guy that's going to frustrate you all year, especially if Antonio Brown actually somehow ridiculously makes it through this year unscathed.
Right. I agree. Okay, that is, I had a game ball. I mean, there's many games, Dalvin Cook, Aaron Jones, but I think we're just going to save those because there's so many.
Yeah, we got nothing else to talk about.
I got plenty to talk about.
Oh, well, go ahead. Let's move.
We're talking about game balls, but
I want to give out one more game ball before we move on, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind.
Game ball goes to.
We didn't mention him last week, coming out of week 1, and he did it again. How about Mark Andrews? 8 catches, 112 yards, a touchdown. You look at what Lamar Jackson's doing. Here's your primary target, right?
Right.
This guy, we looked at, and I don't remember his name coming up and trying to discuss who was the tight end that could kind of break up that trio at the top of
Kelsey, Kittle, and
Ertz. Mark Andrews. I mean, this is back-to-back weeks. He's become a reliable target. He's become a red zone target for Lamar Jackson. If Lamar Jackson, as we've talked about, is going to continue doing what he's doing, Mark Andrews could be that guy. Ertz off to a bit of a slow start. I think he'll be fine, but off to a bit of a slow start. Kittle, throw all that out because he's going to have 43 catches for 615 yards and 7 touchdowns this week through the middle of that Steelers defense.
Yeah.
But this, Andrew, this is back-to-back. This is one more week's a trend, and I think against that Kansas City defense, that's going to be a good matchup for him there.
Yeah, you have to keep an eye on the tight end situation. You talk about the big three with Kittle, Kelsey, and Ertz. Right now, the top, we'll just run down through 2 weeks. PPR scoring, Mark Andrews, your boy Evan Ingram.
Right.
Travis Kelsey, Delaney Walker's back.
Walker, mainly on the strength of touchdowns, which is interesting with him.
Hawkinson basically riding that
on
first
1 week,
on that 1 week, so I'm not really buying him.
Right.
Vance McDonald's very intriguing, especially now with Mason Rudolph in at quarterback. Then comes Ertz. Then comes another old warhorse, Greg Olsen, who is I thought was going to maybe come into his own, but now Cam Newton's hurt, so now it throws everything back in flux again there. But
you worry about his ability to stay healthy, and you're more worried about Cam Newton.
I actually worry more this year about Cam Newton.
I do. Something isn't right there. You could see it, even in game 1, and then with the help, but something is way off there.
Is big and as physical and powerful as he was. He reminds me, of course, he hasn't had the torn knee and everything, but he reminds me so much of Donte Culpepper. Big, strong, can do everything. And we loved watching him do everything. But I'll tell you what, buddy, when Culpepper hit that wall,
it was over.
That was over.
And you just wonder, as much of a beating, as he's taken, and you could equate it to Ben Roethlisberger, although his career hasn't been anywhere near as long. But I think he's taken more punishment even in that shorter amount of time than Ben Roethlisberger did. And I honestly think his body's just breaking down and what that does to him mentally, right? Some of the stuff we saw in the offseason, hearing about with Andrew Luck, what these injuries do to a guy mentally, you can kind of see that in Cam Newton.
You can see it's affecting him mentally. I mean, he's coming to a press conference with headscarves on instead of hats. And
that's kind of the thing, for 2 or 3 years, and everybody got on him about, but he was this jovial, goofing around, wearing the crazy hats and dressing like Jimi Hendrix and having the time of his life. He has just been so churlish.
Now he looks like Aunt Martha at a family reunion.
And he's just been, ever since that Super Bowl loss, it's been up and down, and it's kind of been a steady last season and 2 games issued, churlish and angry, and just, something mentally, physically, it might be done for Cam Newton, which is a shame because what a talent.
Oh, no doubt about that.
You stink.
Throw out another stinky sock. I brought him up. I wasn't going to, but I brought him up. He deserves it so much. Ronald Jones.
Oh,
I mean, that was just pathetic. And,
jeez. That's just pathetic.
Every time you say it, I think.
It was. It is. It's just pathetic. But why there was some sort of, RBBC controversy,
BBC.
I don't understand it. He just looked terrible. He didn't see holes. He was slow getting to holes, missing blocks.
Still can't pass protect, which is what kept him off the field last year.
In the first place, right.
And, we were told that was the only reason if he improved that. Now I see him play his position, and he's horrific there. And look, Peyton Barber isn't Jim Brown by any stretch.
No, but then again, Ronald Jones isn't Peyton Barber.
Exactly. Why isn't LaShawn McCoy in Tampa? Why isn't Duke Johnson in Tampa? I don't understand this.
Exactly.
What Tampa thought the plan, and Bruce Arians is a guy you'd think knows how to build an offense.
You'd think so.
Maybe just Ronald Jones has been that much of a disappointment. Maybe, we just need a couple more weeks of seasoning for your boy Dare Oogly Boogly, and then he's going to be the guy.
Don't you see this from mini camp through training camp through preseason?
Yeah. And look, Dirk Cutter, I would understand this from. Bruce Arians, this stuns me. That's why I kind of rostered both of these guys where I could figure. And Bruce Arians, I don't see it, but I'm an idiot who can't even pronounce anybody's name who sits in front of a microphone. Bruce Arians is a guy I trusted, and he came back with this squad. All right, I'm going to roster these guys. I don't know which one because I don't see it from either of them, but one of these guys is going to be that dude.
Right.
And it isn't the case, and that's what really surprises me here.
You and me both. Yeah, I'm guilty as charged, too, for rostering both of them, thinking, well, okay, I got them both.
Right.
One of them will emerge, and there you go.
One of them's going to be a low-end top 24 running back, 20 to 24 running back, and great, but especially at the price you got them. But turns out to be a ripoff. All right, you got anything else, or we can go home?
Well, let's see. I have a rant, if you got time for it.
Is it a rant if you declare it a rant before you do it?
Yeah.
Or is it just something you wrote?
Because
I wish everybody could see this.
It pissed me off.
For the first time since about 2011, Rick Briggs comes in with typed up show prep sheets. In the past, and I've probably called him for it on the air, I don't remember, he'll have in the pocket, in the breast pocket on his shirt, he'll pull out 2 wadded tissues and a Post-it note, and that's his show prep, and I watch him hold it up in the air and try to see it. Well, now all of a sudden, Rick's got all this fancy typed up prep. They must have got a new typewriter wherever he's working, and so he's all excited, so everything's all structured and prepared, and it's very strange to me, very strange.
I know. And you look amazed that I'm prepared.
I've never seen. Although here's the point, though. We'll give the full background. Rick is so unaccustomed to being prepared. Right before the mics went live, he had to walk out of the studio and back to his car because he's so unaccustomed to being prepared. He didn't think to bring it in with him because he usually doesn't have anything to bring in but 12 beers.
Well, yeah, you got to have priorities, right? On Twitter today there was a question.
All right. I like questions.
And the question was, could today's Dolphins beat the 85 Bears? Could they beat the greatest show on turf? Could they beat those great 49er football teams? And I contended that they would lose to the 72 Dolphins. Now, it's true. At face value, it's true. If you took those 72 Dolphins and brought them into 2019, they'd probably get clocked.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's not really the point
Size,
of contention.
Speed, right.
Right. Not the point of contention. But then I got a reply tweet from some dweeb asking if Tim Foley could cover Albert Wilson, followed by a please. Okay. Now.
Please.
Yeah. Now, okay, I'll tell you what. Let's take a scenario. Let's take Albert Wilson back to 1972. All 5'9", 185 pounds Albert Wilson.
Okay.
Against 6'2", 200-pound Tim Foley. And let's remember,
he's allowed to blow him up.
There's no Mel Blount rules, okay? And you also have to remember that 5'9" Albert Wilson would have been born in about 1942 and not 1992, and he'd probably weigh about 170 to 75 pounds and trained on a farm baling hay. All right? So, I mean, these are the things that drive me nuts about it. It's the point. It's not – look, are today's athletes better players?
It's not even debatable.
Of course they are.
Right.
Of course they are. But I also contend – I mean, we see how great Adrian Peterson is. If you took Adrian Peterson back to the 60s, he would still be a fine ball player.
Yes, he's that type of guy.
Okay?
Yeah.
If you brought Jim Brown to today, he would be a fine ball player because...
Although all the draft nicks would say, first of all, running backs don't matter, and can he catch the ball? But once you turn around and hand him the ball, yeah, he'd be fine with against today's athletes.
Okay, now, if we bring the 72 Dolphins to today, that means they're born in 1992, not 1942.
Right.
Okay? Now you have like guys like Larry Little, Bob Kuechenberg, and the rest of these guys, they would be a lot bigger and faster. Okay, number one, people are just bigger, right?
Right, yeah.
Number two, they trained a lot different now, so they build the muscle and they build for speed. They're going to have computers and so forth. Not only that, the rules have changed in favor of the offense, where you had to be a little lighter and on your feet because you could not use your hands at all.
Right.
50 years ago, whatever it was. So then you have, do you think Paul Warfield's 20-plus yards per catch in 1972 would drop with today's no-touch rules?
No, you might have 40.
That's my point. This is what drives me nuts. Is the 72 Dolphins one of the greatest teams ever? No. But I just hate when people try to compare like an era's best teams with an era's worse and say, well, it's just so much better now. But nothing's the same.
Right, no.
Nothing's the same. All they're trying to do, because you weren't around and you don't remember it,
everything,
you tear it down, you diminish it, you minimize the accomplishments of what these guys did at the time were the best in the world.
Right.
And it drives me, and I tell you what, you bring Muhammad Ali to today, he'd be undefeated and there wouldn't be a guy that lay a glove on him.
No. And it's a shame people act like that because it's an interesting question. When you look at today's Dolphins, the greatest show on turf, Rams, would beat them. It's recent enough. There was enough real talent there. Any team from the 70s, if you just pick them up and moved them either today or even picked up today's Miami Dolphins and moved them to there, even with the rule differences, just so much more athletic, so strong. It was a completely different football game. Those 70s teams wouldn't even recognize what, offensively, scheme-wise, even Ryan Fitzpatrick is doing, right? The 49ers are the ones where I'm sitting here scratching my chin thinking, boy, you wonder. They're going to be so undersized and speed, so much less speed on defense. But, boy, that offense, you might be able to pick up and put into any era what they did. It was so innovative what Bill Walsh did with that. That's the one kind of the matchup I'd like to see.
Oh, no doubt. And that would be an interesting – but everything's in such how would you like to take – I don't know, pick a quarterback. Drew Brees, not picking on Drew Brees, but, little guy.
Right.
And have Dick Butkus plow into him for 4 quarters, 5 steps after the ball's left his hands at full steam. We have a picture of Butkus on the wall, and one of the guys at our draft says, he looks like a high school player. That's because the pads were small. The guy was 6'3", 245 pounds.
Right.
Yeah, that's not huge, but if he's running full steam and you can twist heads and you can break arms and everything, which they did back then, I would.
This is just
it's a different game.
This is just why millennials stink. You remember, I know it was a year or two ago, I had a very similar rant on the air where I got in a debate with somebody again on Twitter.
Yeah.
And remember, he actually said, if it happened before I was born, it doesn't count. It doesn't matter. Everything's so much better now. Everything that happened before is irrelevant.
Right.
All right. He actually got me on that one. I think I remember saying I respected him for saying it. Look, he's an ass for having that opinion, but all right, well, what's the point in continuing to argue? And he drew that line. All right, you win.
Yeah.
I disagree, but you win.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. And the shame of it is those could be fun debates. The Eli Manning Hall of Fame could be and should be fun debates, but it's please.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. You're an idiot. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Advanced sabermetric air yards on Saturdays ending in 7.
Yeah.
Shut up.
And you know what? You brought up another great air yards. I don't care about air yards. You give me how many receiving yards Randy Moss got in a game. I don't care how many were through the air or how many were after the catch.
If they let him start rolling it to him, I'm going to be all right with that too.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me.
All right, let's get out of here and get our blood pressure down, Rick. Holy mackerel. Thanks so much for joining us. We will be back Friday night. Game picks, starts, sits, and your mailbag. Get that in asylumfootball@gmail.com, at asylumfootball on Twitter. Check out everything else over at Fulltime Fantasy, fulltimefantasy.com, at fulltimefantasy. I need to calm down. Until next time, we'll see you. You got to say it. I can't end the show till you
Take
say
care.
it. Thank God. Woo, that one hurts.
Except that dweeb.